So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today at this amazing webinar for Women for Solutions. We have webinars every week, and today is our 126th webinar where we connect, we create awareness, we learn, we inspire, and mostly inspire to real action, to reimagine and to regenerate our world where we want to live in. I'm Laura Jadaru Koch, founder of Women for Solutions and a global network of thousands of women entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs in over 40 countries that seek to balance purpose and profits towards a caring economy. And we also bring lots of simple and effective solution tools that we can choose to implement so that we can really go forward and regenerate our world. So our topic today is fascinating, a topic that not too many people are really focusing on, but it's another pandemic. It's growing up in a porn culture, harms and solutions. As you see, the truth of the solutions are there. The thing is that we're not implemented. And the best part is Dr. Gail Dines, a very good friend. We've known each other for many years, and she is incredibly passionate and has an incredible heart. So because she wants to really help the world to improve in this aspect. So Dr. Gail Dines is Professor Emeritus of Sociology and has been researching and writing about porn industry for well over 30 years. So she's the knowledgeable person to talk to. She's a recipient of the Mayer Center Award for the Studies of Human Rights in North America and author of numerous books and articles. Recommend them all, especially her last book called Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality, and has been translated into 5 languages because it's a problem for the world. Dr. Dine is the founding president and CEO of the non-for-profit Culture Reframed, an amazing entity that for the last 5-6 years has been dedicated to really solve this problem in a practical, simple way. It is dedicated to building resilience and restand into children's and youth in the harms of hypersexuality and pornified society. This incredible NGO, Culture Reframed, developed cutting-edge educational program that promote health development, relationship, and sexuality. In the UK, and I think in Canada, the issue about porn is considered a digital health problem. Dr. Dines has worked with organizations such as American Academy of Pediatrics, because it's in childhood where it starts nowadays, the Center for Disease Control, the International Institute for Trauma and Addiction Professionals, as well as governments, bodies in the US, Brazil, UK, Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and Canada. She regularly appears on CNN, NPR, BBC, CBC, and writes for media outlets such as The Guardian, The Washington Post, and Newsweek. So one more thing, the women empowering pose that we always say, because we need to be inspired and energized for this amazing talk. Put your shoulders back, stand up better, put your chin up, your eyes that twinkle with joy and determination, and with a super wide smile. Gail, the line is all yours.
Thank you very much, Laura. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm just going to, and I just want to give a trigger warning beforehand, because what you're going to see for many of you will be quite shocking. But what I want to say, for however shocking it is for you, all I'm going to be showing are images that the average 11-year-old boy gets to in about 8 seconds. So as disturbing as it is, I just want you to think about how these kids feel. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, So what I'm going to be talking about is growing up in a porn culture and the harms and solutions, because without the harms and solutions, this feels overwhelming. And to just give you a sense of how big the porn industry is, I just want to start with a few statistics. Porn sites get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined, according to the Huffington Post. Pornhub statistics for 2009 were 42 billion visits, that's per year, up from 33 billion in 2018. The daily average of 100 million visitors, 962 searches for porn per second. They uploaded nearly 5 million new videos just in 1 year, and there's already millions on the Pornhub site, and they created over 1 million hours of new content in 1 year. So I just wanted to get a sense of what the biggest, most traveled porn website in the world looks like. So Pornhub boasts that 100 million daily visits is as if the combined populations of Canada, Poland, Netherlands, and Australia visited Pornhub every day. So let's talk about what this means to grow up in a porn culture where pornography is affordable, accessible, and anonymous. The 3 A's that drive demand. And I'm specifically going to focus on kids, but also look at the effects on men. Now, what we found is that those who are charged with looking after kids, and that can be anything from parents to experts to medical professionals, they really don't know what's going on. And this has been the most shocking thing whenever we go out and lecture. And I gave the keynote at the American Academy of Pediatrics a few years ago with 15,000 pediatricians, and this was news to them. And it shouldn't be news to them, because if any group should be out there fighting for the rights of children to grow up in a porn-free culture, it should be the American Academy of Pediatrics. But who knows about what's going on? The media. So I want to give you an example of a story that was in Details. So Details is like Cosmopolitan for men. And they had a story called How Internet Porn is Changing Teen Sex. And they interviewed a pornographer called Joanna Angel. And she said something very interesting. She said, the girls these days, they just seem to come to the set porn ready. Now, while most girls and young women will not end up on a porn set, this does not make what she's saying inaccurate. What she's saying, I think more profoundly, is that our girls are being socialized to see themselves in a pornified way. And I'm going to discuss how that happens in our culture. So first of all, when you think about what it means to grow up, and you're developing your notion of what it means to be a woman, a man, a girl, a boy, is you draw from the culture those most powerful messages about gender. And there is nothing more powerful in our culture than media images. And as Stuart Ewing once said, very interesting, he said, when we lived in a print-based culture, which is what most of us grew up in over the age of 35, print-based, he said we developed some immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the printed word. What I would argue is we have no such immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the image. And we actually have research now which shows that images bypass the frontal lobes of the brain, the executive part of the brain, and land in a different area, which is very hard to have a rational conversation with. For example, if you have a statement in print, you can engage with the truth or falsity of that statement. But how do you engage with the truth or falsity of an image? Because we are absolutely developed in a way to think that images are true. We have to. That was a form of survival. You can't be looking at a lion in front of you and say, well, is that a lion or not? Do I deconstruct it as something else? No, you have to take what's given in order to survive. So even while this image is a lie, because she doesn't look like that, the truth is it's telling the truth, even as it's lying, because that's how we process images. So if you notice, for all the millions of images in image-based culture, most of them are of young, hypersexualized, bolted down flesh, thin white females. This is the dominant culture of our image. Wherever you go, this image just stares out at you. Young, hot, pornified, blonde often, an amazingly blonde culture. And I want to give you some media theory. So in media studies, we have a concept called the reader inscribed in the text. That means all images are made by producers who have in their head, they have who is going to be the reader. So let's deconstruct this image. So who is the reader inscribed in the text? Who is she speaking to? And would you all agree that she's probably not speaking to her mother saying, let's go for a cup of coffee after the photo shoot? All right, she's speaking to men. And let's take in the posture, the clothing, and the gaze, the G-A-Z-E. And what does that gaze say? What it says is it speaks to men, and very succinctly, it says what? Fuck me. So this is the standard gaze of our hypersexualized culture, is quote, fuck me. And excuse my language, but I'm going to be using some of this just to explain what's going on in our culture. Now, what was interesting in my feminist theories class, I would have female students come up and say, do the fuck me look. And they would all immediately go into it. They know exactly what to do, you know, hands on head, chest out. And then I would ask 3 males to come up and say, now do it. And they wouldn't know what to do. They would stand there like, well, what do we do? We'd have to explain, put your hand here, lift your head up, you know, put out your chest. And what would be interesting is to have 3 women on one side, 3 men on the other. And the women would look perfectly normalized given the culture we live in, and the men would look ridiculous. So the question is, why did they look ridiculous? And the answer actually here lies in the gender system that has been created. To be a female today in our culture is to be hot, is to be sexually vulnerable. That's why the fuck me look works for women. For men, to be hot is not fuck me. What is it? It's fuck you. It's a level of aggressiveness and assertiveness. Now let's think about the result of bringing up 50% of the population to believe that sexual vulnerability is hot, and the other 50% to believe that sexual violence and assertiveness is hot. Now throw in alcohol, throw in hookup culture, and what have you laid the groundwork for? For rape, which is why in sociology, many of us argue that men who rape are not actually deviants. And indeed, the psychological research shows this, right? This is not true of serial rapists who murder, but the sort of frat boys, etc., who rape. There is no psychological profile. So the question is, those men who rape are not deviants. They are rather over-conformists. They are over-conforming to every single message they have gotten as they've been growing up and recognizing themselves as men. So as a sociologist, my area of interest is less men who rape, but more men who don't rape. What are the protective factors that these boys and men have grown up with that has got them to refuse to internalize the messages that women are disposable sex objects? This is the kind of studies that need to occur, because the studies on rapists have not yielded much information at all. Now, we do let some women of color in if they look like Beyonce or Cardi B. And I want you to see a theme here. What happens when you see women of color in pop culture is they're often in animal skins, painted with animals, etc., like Rihanna. Now, this is a trope that comes straight out of slavery, where African-American women were seen as hypersexualized, in fact, out of control sexually. And the reason for that was that this was a legitimating ideology that blamed African-American women for the wholesale rape on the slave plantations. You couldn't blame the good, upstanding white plantation owner because he was rendered absolutely hopeless in the face of this animalistic sexuality. And you see these tropes come through today, and certainly in pornography, the image of African-American women is amongst the most racist image, and that is true also for African-American men. So what do we know about girls who internalize these norms? What do we know about girls who self-sexualize? Well, what's interesting is the American Psychological Association did a report, and this was the most downloaded report they ever did. And what they found is that girls who internalize these norms, they learn to self-objectify, see themselves as disposable sex objects. And this leads to an increase in anxiety, depression, body loathing, risky sexual behavior, early pregnancy, STDs, suicidal ideation, dropping out of school, self-harming, and sexual victimization. And I see some people taking notes. There's no need to. I'm going to direct you to where all of this is on our website, the Culture Reframed website. So what happened to me when I was writing my book, Pornland, and also when I was watching my students, and I've been a professor for 30 years, I could see a change in them. And those of us who were teaching women's studies, we all said the same thing. Something has shifted in this culture. And in 2008, I found myself in a prison in Connecticut interviewing 8 men, all of who were in for downloading child pornography and raping a child. And the time between downloading their first child pornography and raping a child was approximately 6 months to a year. And one of them, who had raped his 10-year-old stepdaughter, was trying to show off and use words like grooming to show me he really knew what was going on. By the way, there was no remorse from any of these men. Not one had any remorse that they'd actually blown up the life of children. So he looks at me when he's talking about how he groomed his stepdaughter. Then he said, the culture did a lot of the grooming for me. And I have to say, I almost fell off my chair. He was like, that's it. He's got it. He understands it in a way that was the missing piece of my puzzle. Because what he was saying really was, look, we used to need individual perpetrators to groom individual girls so that when they were raped, they would basically be what are called compliant victims. But what he said is the culture is turning girls into compliant victims today. It's grooming them. And he was so right. So now we have a mass culture perpetrating against our girls en masse, a perpetrating culture, basically. And this is back to Joanna Angel's comment that girls today come to the set porn ready. So he's got exactly what Joanna Angel's got. He got it right. So this is what we say to girls today. You have 2 choices, either conformity or invisibility. And put in another way, and again, excuse my language, is you're either invisible or you're fuckable. That's it. Fuckability versus invisibility. And I can tell you, when I go and speak in high schools and I speak in colleges and I say that, there's a gasp from the girls because they realize this has been their life. They're either conforming to hypersexualized culture or they're totally invisible. And what happens after my lectures is I have a line of young women, often crying, on a line of young men often crying, and I'll talk about that later. And the young women say to me, I chose fuckability. I did it, and you know what? I hate it. It's not who I am, but I don't want to be alone. And then I have the next woman saying, you know what? I chose invisibility. I couldn't do fuckability, but I'm alone and I hate it and I can't stand it. So this is not a choice. When you say either conformity or invisibility or fuckability or invisibility, you're not giving girls a choice. You're not letting them develop who they should be, who they want to be. You're not allowing them to become the architects of their own lives. Instead, you are foisting on them a patriarchal, pornographic representation of what girls should look like. And when I say to young people out there, and this is true when we're talking to boys and girls, has anyone helped you navigate your way through this porn culture? They all respond the same way. No, and we are drowning. This is what it feels to grow up today in a porn culture. Now, I want to talk about pornography for boys. Now, this same magazine, Details, again, Cosmopolitan for Men, this is the same story. And they wrote, there is an entire generation of young people who think sex ends with a money shot to the face. If you don't know what a money shot is, it's ejaculation on the face. Now, I have seen more porn than any human being should have to endure. I don't think I've ever seen a porn movie or scene without ending with ejaculation on the face by 1, 2, 3, 4 men. And let me tell you something interesting. And I learned so much from my students. So we were discussing this. And let me say, just think about how many of us grew up with this. We didn't grow up with this. This is relatively new. So one of my students is saying she'd actually found a guy who wanted to date her, which is very unusual on college campuses. But he sat her down and he said, I have a deal breaker. What was the deal breaker? He said, you have to let me come on your face. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. And so he wouldn't date her. So I'm like sitting there saying, is this what he said? And all the other students are nodding. And they're saying, yes, this is what all the guys want to do. And a lot of, we have to do it. And even they don't even ask. They just often, as they say, come on your face. Now, when I was growing up, if the guy would have said to me, can I come on your face? I would have thought he was a psychopath. I would have ran in the opposite direction. But this is where how pornography normalizes the way men treat women, boys treat girls. It has become the major form of sex ed. And you just have to be around young people to know this. Just listen to what they say, because their stories absolutely give me the best data. Although I'm a social scientist, the best data always comes from listening to young people. And I'll just give you a quick story there. Pornland, my book, was selected at the Sydney Writers' Festival as one of the featured books. This is a major festival and there's thousands of people come. And every writer's book who's selected, the writer has to do 4 talks. The first talk, there was over 1,000 people in the room. I mean, it was so huge I couldn't see out. And they set me up, the Writers' Festival set me up because I was on a panel with 4 other women. Every single one of them was pro-porn, arguing that pornography is a form of empowerment, that it's great for young women to be watching it and engaging in it. It's a way to make money. And I, of course, was the only one saying, this is ridiculous, right? This is not the lives of young women. All these women, by the way, were academics or well-known writers. Anyway, they turned to me at one point, the facilitator, who was the most pro-porn of them all, and she said to me, Gail Dines, all you've got are anecdotes, which, by the way, I didn't, because I printed out all the research and it was like piled high, because I knew that's what they were going to argue, and I had all the empirical research. But they kept saying to me, you've only got anecdotes. And then I couldn't even see a young woman in the back. She stands up and she says, I'm an anecdote. And then another woman does, and then another. And then you've got all of these young women screaming, saying, I'm an anecdote, I'm an anecdote. This was the truth of their stories. This was the truth of their lives, that this is what they have to navigate. This is what they have to live in. And it is being ignored by most people. So they are left in this, to swim in this porn culture. Now, one of the problems we have is a parental naivete gap. So a study at Indiana University showed that half as many parents thought their 14 to 18-year-olds had seen porn than actually watched it. And it even gets worse, that of those parents, they underestimated what sex acts their kids were seeing by a factor of 10. So a lot of them think, and this is true when I go and give my lectures, when I say, what do you think porn is? They're thinking Playboy, maybe Penthouse, maybe Hustler. Absolutely no understanding. And I understand this. If you don't use porn, how would you know what it is? But this is the porn that the kids grow up with. So what do we know? So the gold standard empirical study is by Anna Bridges and her team. And they found that 90% of the most watched acts in porn, of the most watched scenes, contained violence against women, 90%. Now, her study from 2010 is about to be published, it's updated. And I just read the pre-published version yesterday. You know what number it's jumped to from 90%? If you can believe this, 100% of the top watched. And this is, Anna Bridges, by the way, is one of the top researchers in the field, one of the most published in academic journals. So she found in 100% some form of violence. So let me explain what these images, what these sex acts are in pornography. Now, no matter what you look at on Pornhub, no matter what category you go to, whether you go to teen porn or Asian porn or black porn or MILF porn, you will have the same sex acts. So they are, number one, always gagging with a penis. So the woman is being gagged with a penis so far down the throat, she starts to choke. And the tears are streaming down her face because she can't breathe. And as she tries to pull away, the male just pulls her head closer to the penis. And sometimes she vomits, and they keep that in. Another standard, these are all standard in every virtual scene you'll see, is very, very rough anal sex. Now, the problem with this is that women who are porn performers regularly get what are called anal prolapses. Their anuses literally drop out of the body because the anal sex is so rough. This is why the average shelf life of a woman in pornography is 3 months. Their body simply cannot tolerate the violence. Ejaculation on face, as we talked about. ATM, which stands for ass to mouth, where the male puts his penis into her anus and then into her mouth without washing. Standard act. Hair pulling, spitting in her face. Now, the latest popular act is strangulation, which should be separated from choking, because strangulation is hands around the throat. Now, why is this really important? Number one, we know from studies that women who are battered and are strangled by their batterer are more likely to die at the hands of the batterer. We also know that when you are strangled, you can take up to a week for the effects of it. So let me give you an example of what happened again to one of my students. A guy she was with said, I want to show you something I've seen in porn. And the next thing she knows, she's passed out. Right? And she wakes up and he'd strangled her during his orgasm, which is very popular in pornography. Now, the first thing about this that was shocking, the second thing after strangling her, was that she could have been dead. And you know what? When she woke up, he wasn't over her trying to see if she was alive or dead. He was in the bathroom cleaning himself up. He left her in the other room. Anyway, what happens is that it takes up to a week for the effects of strangulation to show themselves. So you can wake up, think you're fine, go to bed 4 or 5 days later and die, because it takes that level of time for sometimes the throat to swell up and block your air passages. So the standard porn scene that the average boy, and the average age of first getting to porn now is lower, it's between 7 and 9, right? So this is what he's seeing. He's seeing a woman being gagged, orally, anally, vaginally penetrated, having her hair pulled, being spat in her face, being called, and I'm going to tell you what they call them, so excuse my language, bitches, cunts, whores, and the favorite term for women in porn is cum dumpsters. And at the end of the scene is her being ejaculated on by 3, 4, 5, 6 men, and often in the eye. And today there is a antibiotic resistant strain of gonorrhea of the eye going around the porn industry. This is what these women have to endure. So I want to give you an example of a popular porn site, gagamycock.com. We fuck them in the face till they cry, right? They don't even pretend, right? We fuck them in the face till they cry. Can these fuck toys be any dumber? Now, I want you to read what goes, because when I was writing my book, Pornland, I could barely stand to look at the images. I was kind of writing my notes with my hand in front of my face. And I thought, how does this average 10, 11-year-old boy stand this? Because this is the only porn out there. There is no softcore porn now. You can't find it. And if you want softcore porn, you have to have a credit card, which of course they don't have. So they go to the free porn on Pornhub. So on a site called Gag Me and Then Fuck Me, this is what they say. Do you know what we say to things like romance and foreplay? We say fuck off. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. We make them gag, we give them a sticky bath. Now look how clever this is. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. That's not true. Every man doesn't want to do this, but you're 11 years old. You've got no repertoire of sexuality. This is your first introduction to sex. You can't say, well, actually, my girlfriend doesn't want me to do this and my wife doesn't or my partner doesn't. You don't know this. And so this is a way they're saying, we know what you want. We know who you are. Another example, and this is from a Altered Assholes, an anal sex that is very powerful. And this is the promotional copy for Anally Ripped Whores, a movie. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. Chicks being ass fucked till their sphincters are pink, puffy, and totally blown out. Adult diapers just might be in store for these whores when their work is done. Now, I want you to, again, just think of this. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. No, they don't. That 11-year-old boy, when he puts porn or boobies or whatever into Google, you know what he wants? He thinks maybe he'll see a pair of breasts. He thinks if he gets really lucky, he'll see a naked woman. He doesn't want this. This is not what he's expecting. He's not expecting to be thrown into a world of sexual torture. So now I want you to think of that 11-year-old boy who put porn or boobies into Google and think what's going on in his life. In his stomach is a toxic stew of fear, shame, revulsion, self-loathing. In fact, what we're doing is we are traumatizing a generation of boys. And we know that because this is not what they want. Now, this is terrible for our boys, but it is a brilliant business model, because what we know about trauma from the research is that when you go through a traumatic event, if you do not deal with the trauma, you then do what is called trauma habituation behavior, which means that you keep going back to the site of the trauma in the hope that you will have a different ending. Now, of course, all it does is dig the trauma deeper into your neurons. So if this boy is traumatized by looking at porn, how's he going to respond? He's going to keep going back again and again and again. So what you're doing is you're building in trauma that leads to addiction into the business model for your average 11-year-old kid. This is how the porn industry is working. Now, I have to say something that's really interesting is, feminists get a bad rap for being man-haters. And the reality is feminists are men's best friends. We are the only group who are out there rooting for their humanity. We are the only group who believe that boys will not be boys, that boys are born fully human with all the capacity for connection and intimacy and love that girls are. We do not believe they're born rapists. We do not believe they're born porn users. We do not believe they're porn johns. Now, how do I know that? I know that as a sociologist. I know that as a feminist, but more profoundly, I know that as a mother of a son. No one can tell me that my beautiful boy was born with any less capacity for humanity than girls. And you know what? If my boy wasn't, then your boy wasn't. So this is the way the porn industry is not only destroying girls, but also our boys. And we need to see our boys as victims of the porn industry. And this is where Culture Reframed is different to any other group, is that we really understand the way in which the predatory porn industry is taking our boys and really destroying their capacity for everything that is important in the world. And that includes love, intimacy, and connection. So how did we get here? How did we get that this is free, available, and accessible within 5-10 seconds? So the domestication of porn in 2000, the domestication of the internet in 2000 made porn more affordable, accessible, and anonymous, the three major drivers of demand. I also have to say, when we talk about demand, we will never get rid of trafficking until we get rid of pornography. Pornography is one of the biggest drivers of demand to traffic women. Now, this is from Adult Video News. The corporatization of porn isn't something that will happen. It's something that has happened. And I bet you no one here really has heard of MindGeek. Am I right? No one's heard of MindGeek? Okay, this is your Amazon of porn. This is the company that controls almost all of the porn that is distributed in the world. They are based in Montreal. Go on their website, mindgeek.com, and you will see that they define themselves as search engine optimizers and specialists in IT. You will not see the word porn anywhere. They control the top visited porn sites in the world, 10 of the 15 most lucrative, and the one they own, which is the most lucrative, is Pornhub. Pornhub is in the top 10 visited sites in the world. It's up there with YouTube, Google, and Facebook. Now, things have gotten much worse during the pandemic. In March, we saw an increase from 120 million visitors a day to Pornhub to 134 million. Now, you know why that was? This was Pornhub's gift to COVID. It made its premium content free. Now, most of Pornhub is free, but its more technologically sophisticated porn is behind a firewall, the premium. They immediately made it free, they said, because more men are at home. So let's give them more porn. The content then became much greater. So you had more men on porn much longer. What we found, they made it free. This was immediately the lockdown happened in March. In Italy, visits increased to Pornhub by 57%, in France by 38%, in Spain by 61%. Now, I'm sure many of you heard about the increase in domestic violence during COVID because women are locked in the home. Women are now locked in the home with men who are using even more pornography. We also know, I recently did a seminar with Interpol and all the international agencies fighting child pornography. Do you know what else we've seen during COVID? A huge increase in the production and consumption of child pornography, child sexual abuse images, because the kids are now locked at home with their parents, and we know that the majority of kids who end up in child pornography are sold into it by their parents. So this COVID has made life so much worse on so many levels for women and children. In the USA, Pornhub traffic increased over 40% at 3 a.m. during COVID when it was free. Why? Because men go to bed, because men are up later, and also they have to get up for work, and they're waiting for their family to go to bed to get onto Pornhub. So now we get into the cross-platform marketing to kids. So this is where we get into serious trouble. So let's start with the cell phone, which is now, if you ever thought you had control over your kid, it all got thrown out the window when the cell phone became mainstream. And the average age of first getting a cell phone today in the United States is during middle school. By the way, it shouldn't surprise you that the leading R&D experts on how to develop the actual screen on the cell phone was from the porn industry. They understood that it was crucial to develop the screen so that most men and boys would get their porn from the cell phone. Now, stats on Instagram, 800 million numbers of monthly active users, 40 billion photos uploaded today. I mean, how does anyone even begin to manage to moderate that? 20% of all internet users use the Instagram, 68% female. Snapchat, 210 million active users, 69% of 13 to 17-year-olds use Snapchat. 53% age 15 to 22, 61% of Snapchat users are female, 3.5 billion snaps a day. And what is the main snap? It's a selfie. Right, 74% of Snapchat photos are selfie, 1,000 selfies posted on Instagram every second, 19 out of 20 teens have taken a selfie, 93 million selfies taken each day. Now, let me ask you a question. Does anyone on this webinar remember when we used to take pictures of other people? Do you remember that? Look how crazy this is, standing there with your phone, getting the best sexualized selfie you can. We are bringing up our girls to be a generation of voyeuristic narcissists of their own body. My students tell me there's never a good enough selfie. You have to keep taking them and taking them until you perfect it. And think, if you can't look beyond your own body, if you're so absorbed in it, which is not their fault, I'm not blaming them, this is the culture. Think about all the female energy we are draining from being activists, from going out in the world and making a change, when this generation is so focused on making the best selfie they can. Now, let me show you how Instagram works. So the porn performers have their own followers on Instagram. Sunny Leone has 40 million followers. Remember, the majority of people using Instagram, kids, okay? You go on to Sunny Leone, you swipe, and within about 10 seconds, you get to her movies on Pornhub. So most kids today are accessing pornography through Snapchat and Instagram. Pornhub, by the way, has the Snapchat Girl of the Week and the Instagram Girl of the Week. So they are cross-marketing to kids from pornography to social media platforms for teens in a seamless, this is seamless. You don't even know you're on Pornhub. And Snapchat is the worst. Why? Because Snapchat has Snapchat Premium. Now, Snapchat Premium is where the porn is. And there are companies now, the biggest one is called FanCentro, but the 6 major companies in the porn industry that work with the porn performers, and they set up their Snapchat accounts, and then they put all their porn images up there. Then they hook them up into Pornhub. And one of the things they promise these porn performers is, if Snapchat finds your porn, because ostensibly you're not supposed to have porn on Snapchat, but of course they do, but if they find it and take it down, we will get it back up and running within 24 hours so you don't lose your fan base. There's an entire ecosystem of companies working with the porn industry, working to cross-platform to kids, to drag them to the porn industry. Now, how do kids get porn on Snapchat, there's other ways on the social media sites. They use emojis. So if you put in a lollipop, you're going to find oral sex. You put in cherries, you're going to find breasts. You put in a peach, that represents anal sex. Anything with tears, and that's ejaculate on the face. So parents are looking at their kids' Instagram or Snapchat account, seeing some cute emojis, not understanding that this means, I'm looking for anal sex where they ejaculate on a face afterwards. So it's a language of emojis. Now, Instagram, Snapchat, and other apps are gateways to the porn industry by normalizing porn. So what do we know? What is the impact on boys and men? So if we look at the brain, and now the new really exciting research in psychology is on the brain and looking at how the brain develops. Do you know that the adult brain is not fully online till about 30? You haven't got your full prefrontal cortex till 30. So what we see, especially around the teen, preteen brain, which is of course where the pornographer is targeting the boys, is that the prefrontal cortex is actually in a battle with the more emotional part of the brain. And the brain is the teen brain is actually geared towards novelty and risk-taking, which in a non-toxic culture is exactly how it should be. Because when you're developing into a teen, you want to take risks, you want novelty, you have to begin to think who you are. Put that in a pornified culture with very smart porn industry who knows exactly how to harness the teenage brain to the porn sites, you've got a terrible perfect storm. So that's the reality of what happens. So first of all, we've got a lot of science now on why porn is so addictive. And a lot of the reasons is the younger you get to it, the more addictive it is because of the teen brain. We have 40 years of peer-reviewed research from psychology, from sociology, from pediatrics, you name it, that shows the harms of pornography. Let me just discuss some of them. So the earlier a boy gets to porn, the more likely he has to limited capacity for intimacy, the more likely he is to have use coercive tactics, which include sexting, sexual harassment, rape, risky sexual behavior, increased levels of anxiety and depression, habitual addictive use, and erectile dysfunction. There is no question in the research now. No question. Anyone studying pornography from a multidisciplinary approach knows that the jury is way in and has been in for years. So what's the future? One of the things about today's porn and the extreme market, the gonzo market, is so many of the fans want to see so much more stuff. Now, look, this was in 2003. Now, I keep this here because by 2003, within 3 years of it becoming domesticated, already the fans wanted harder and harder stuff because they're getting desensitized. Now, literally, they have done everything they can to the female body in porn, apart from kill her. There's nowhere else to go, okay? So where did they go? So the Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition in 2002. This is crucial. The Free Speech Coalition is the lobbying arm of the porn industry. They went to the Supreme Court and they asked them to strike down the provisions in the 1996 Child Pornography Prevention Act. What the Supreme Court agreed with the porn industry was that it was too limiting for the porn industry's free speech to allow women in who looked under 18. So they said, yes, as long as she's 18, even if she looks younger, it's fine. That was thanks to Ashcroft. And overnight, we got an explosion in teen porn sites. These are just some examples. And the teen porn category on Pornhub is the largest single category. More men are looking for teen-looking girls than anything else. First time with daddy. It's okay, she's my stepdaughter. Thousands and thousands and thousands of videos up there with older men with girls who look about 12 or 13. And you know what? Pornhub cannot moderate its content because of the user uploading. So they have found younger kids on there. And I was an expert witness for the Department of Justice 3 years ago at the Third Circuit level, one before the Supreme Court, arguing why they needed age verification for those on the set. And the porn industry has been fighting that for 30 years. We won, okay, the Department of Justice won. And then 2 years later, the same judge overturned it and said they don't have to keep any verification of ages for those on the porn set. So now you can get kids, and the secondary producers, i.e. the distributors, are not held accountable. Now, latest research coming out, which I know from interviewing those men. Let me go back to the prison. You remember those 8 men who I interviewed? They were all in for looking at child porn and downloading and raping a child. Not one of them was a pedophile. Not one of them had touched a kid till their 30s. They were all porn addicts. And when I said to them, "Are you pedophiles?" they looked really insulted. They said, "No, of course we're not pedophiles." So then I said, "Then why did you rape a child?" You know what they said? "We got bored. We wanted something different." So they get bored and they blew up the kid's life. Now we have empirical research coming out. And let me read you this. Clinical experience and research evidence now accumulating to suggest that the internet is not simply drawing attention to those with existing pedophile interests, but is contributing to the crystallization of those interests in people, they should say men, with no explicit sexual interest in children. Do you understand what's going on here? Men who are not pedophiles are raping children. We have now expanded the number of men who are perpetrating against children. As if we didn't have enough before this, we've now expanded that base. So what are we going to do? How are we going to change our toxic culture? Because we have to do this. We cannot. This is not a sustainable culture for us to, our next generation, we have lost a generation to porn. Right? There's no question. We have to fight for the next generation. At Culture Reframed, we say use the Gulliver strategy. Tie this monster down any which way you can. Any method you can use, whether it's regulation. This is the only multi-billion-dollar industry above ground that is not regulated. No regulation whatsoever. Now, at Culture Reframed, we take a different approach. We define it as a public health crisis, and we take a public health approach. And just let me tell me how I got started in this. So I have been writing and researching about the porn industry for over 30 years as an academic, as an activist and writer. And then in about 5 years ago, actually, by the time I met Laura, I had invited to give a keynote at a women's philanthropy organization. And afterwards, a group of women came up to me and they said, "We want to give you money, lots of it, to start a nonprofit." So here I was, very happy. I loved academia, I loved teaching. But how many times in a lifetime do you get a group of philanthropists coming up to you and saying, "We're going to want to give you money to do something"? And I have to tell you, by that time, I was going through a crisis myself. And that crisis was that I was going around lecturing, especially in hospitals and child protection services. And I would give all of this out. And I would watch everybody just literally, women would, and it's mainly women who came in, pediatricians, nurses, what have you. And they would come into my lecture at 9 a.m. as professionals. By 9:15, they were all mothers, freaking out. And I remember one particular hospital, I had about 500 pediatricians and nurses there. And I looked out and I thought, what am I doing? I'm dropping this on them and I'm leaving them in this state. And I was really having a crisis around this. What am I going to do? And at that very same time, these group of philanthropists came forward. So I did the only thing I was destined to do. I became a professor emerita, so I wasn't teaching. And I started Culture Reframed. And I brought together the top public health experts. I brought together pediatricians, adolescent health experts, sex educators, neuroscientists, psychologists, you name it. We all got together and I said, "I've got this money. What should we do?" And we all agreed the public health approach. Why? Because it knocks down silos. Normally, doctors don't speak to social workers, who don't speak to anti-trafficking, who don't speak to child protection. The beauty of public health is it knocks down silos and everyone sits together and talks. So we take the public health approach. Our vision is we envision a world based on equality and empathy, free from the harms of hypersexualized media and porn culture. Our mission is we raise awareness and provide education and resources to build resilience and resistance to hypersexualized media and porn culture. So what we did is we started to say, what we went out there and we did research. And in public health, they say the key protective factor to bringing up healthy children, key protective factors are knowledgeable, skilled, and confident parents and medical professionals. So this is what we decided to do. The first thing we were going to do, we were going to build a parents program to educate parents, to give them the skills, knowledge, and confidence to build resilience and resistance in their kids to pornography. That was our first goal. So the key protective factors, as I said, parents, educated medical professionals. This was our expert team. And our programs are built by all members. It's a multidisciplinary program built by everyone has a terminal degree in their field. We then build it, we seamlessly weave it into an online educational platform, which I'll explain to you a bit later. And then it goes out again for peer review by a second set of experts. But remember, it's for the first program is for parents. So sample topics for parents of tweens. We now have 2 programs. First one is for parents of tweens. We discuss boundaries, consent and privacy, managing technology, navigating online and offline friendships, leading discussions skillfully. For parents of teens, the topics, this is the second program that just went up earlier this year, just last year. Physical, emotional and cognitive development of teens, because you'd be amazed how many parents are not aware of where their teens are at on that level. Healthy relationships, toxic masculinity produced by the porn industry, the problems with sexting and a digital footprint, and how to protect your kids from predators, human trafficking and online safety. Each program took a year and a half to build, because we wanted an A packet with A content. The modules, we have modules, all are research-based, all are user-friendly, all multimedia. We have embedded videos in the modules so that some of the parents can sit and watch some of the media with their kids to discuss it. We do say watch the videos first. It's interactive and it's flexible for varied levels of engagement. You can go into our programs for 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days. That's how large it is. Now, what happened is we built it for parents, and then all of a sudden, we started getting a flood of people from all over the world. So by the way, our parents program is being used all over the world, but we started getting professionals like pediatricians, therapists, educators, sex educators coming to us saying, you've got the best thing we've ever seen. We want to use it. So we said, okay, and they were using it, but we realized if you are a professional, you need a deeper analysis. So imagine the parents programs, one for parents of tweens, one for parents of teens. Then off the parents program for professionals and for those parents who are interested, we have enrichments, which are more academic and which can be used by pediatricians or social workers or anyone in a professional setting. So one of the enrichments, we had a neurologist, consultant write a whole report using the research on porn and the brain and explaining the latest research. We've had tech specialists build one called All Things Tech. That's going up next week. We have intervention and recovery, which was built by therapists, so that therapists can now go on and find out and that's going up next week. And the latest thing that we're now looking to, we're writing grants for, is we want to build the first ever sex education program through a lens of critical porn literacy. You see, what's wrong with sex education, and this would be worldwide, by the way, and this started because what happened was in England last year, they made it mandatory to teach sex ed in the schools. And all of a sudden, we started getting all the English teachers coming at us saying, we need sex education, and there's nothing about pornography. Now, you cannot teach sex ed to kids whose sexual templates have been formed by pornography without first unpacking what they've learned. So what we have done is when we're in the process, again, as I say, of looking for grants, we've got the first half done, which is the theory behind it. We are now looking to build out a whole sex education curriculum for teachers where unpacking pornography for kids is the major thing. Now, I want to say somebody else has done this in England, and it is a appalling. They've argued that there's no, in this, I just looked at the curriculum, and that's why we've got more of the people coming at us, because they're really upset with the curriculum that's being dispersed in England around pornography. They're saying pornography has no effect on kids. They're saying there's no research, and that kids should use porn responsibly. This is what they're teaching in the schools. You cannot use porn responsibly. It's like saying smoke responsibly. It's ridiculous. So this is what we're doing. This is our next thing. We're also doing something else, which is really important. Our next goal is what we're calling pep talks. We are now again writing grants for this, because we decided to make our parents program free. We did that as a political issue. We thought every parent, irrespective of income, should have access to this. So that means we have no revenue stream. So all of our money comes from foundations and individuals who feel like driven to help us to do this. Now, just an example of one of the things we set in for therapists and parents is warning signs. If your kid's getting into trouble with pornography, these are some of the warning signs. Now we say it's not only could be linked to pornography, but just keep an eye out. Withdrawal from family peers and activities, closed device. So if your kid closes the device, suddenly when you enter the room, a warning sign. Spends excessive amounts of time in the bathroom. Secretive about online, offline friends. Parents should treat online friends as they treat offline friends. You need to know who they are. Lack of sleep. From pediatricians, we heard that is the first way they found out that kids are using porn is they're not sleeping, because they're using porn. If the kid starts using precocious sexual language that you're not used to, you see mood shifts like anxiety and depression. Suddenly, if the kid has more money than they had before, that's a sign they're being groomed via the internet and somebody is giving them money. And if suddenly their sexual behavior is not developmentally appropriate. So this is all in our program for warning signs. We even have conversation scripts. We scripted out 12 conversations that you can have with your kid. And the reason we scripted this out is just before I was about to launch this, I went on a speaking tour of LA and spoke to about, I would say, 2,000 parents across LA. And I said, we're going to launch our Parent of Tweens program. This was like 2.5 years ago. And we're going to have bullet points for conversations. And the parents would jump out of the seat and say, no bullet points, script out, tell us what to say word for word. Well, of course, we don't expect you to use it word for word, but we went back to our specialist in conversations, and they wrote, I said to them, no bullet points. The parents want it scripted out. Now, we assume that your kid would rather be anywhere else in the world than talking to you about pornography. So we have scripted for each conversation scripted out. There is a second one in case it goes wrong on how to bring it back. And believe me, in most cases, it will go wrong, right? And if it does, we tell you to stop and then start again later. What we say is do not have 100-minute conversations about porn. Have 100 one-minute conversations about porn. And we even tell you how to set the stage. Like if you're going to talk to a boy, do it in the car, so your eyes are straight ahead, or do it while you're biking, never face to face. Studies find that boys are much more likely to listen if they're not looking you in the eye. So when my son was growing up, he liked to bake. So I would always make sure I was at one end of the kitchen and he was at the other, so we would talk. And he also liked to mountain bike. So my husband took up mountain biking. And I always joke, he spent that year on crutches, my husband, but at least it was worth it to have the conversations with my son. So how do you want to get involved? If you're interested in more, go to our website at culturereframed.org. Everything you've seen here is up there. Also, my TED Talk is up there, so you can pass that around to people. We've also started something new. We're giving virtual tours of our work. If you are interested in taking a virtual tour of our work, please let us know and I'll give you the address next. Also, let your friends and colleagues know about Culture Reframed. We are the only non-faith-based, science-driven, research-driven organization in the world doing this to build resilience and resistance to kids about pornography. We are info@culturereframed.org. And I want to say something to end. I want to say that as a culture, we've dropped the ball on this as adults. We really have. We have handed our kids over to the porn industry. Our kids are too precious. We love them, we nurture them. My son is in his 30s. He's always in my head. He's always somewhere here taking up space, as your kids are. And you know what? At some point in your life, I really think some young person will come up and say, where were you when this was going on? Where were you when porn hijacked our culture and our sexuality? And there's two answers to that. And one is to shrug. And the other answer, which is the one I hope we all give, is to say, I stood there and I fought. I fought with everything I had to make this a livable, wonderful, joyful culture for you to grow up in. And you know what? If we change that from the I to the we fought, you know what our last words in that sentence will be? We won. Because there's nothing more unstoppable than a group of women out there fighting for the rights of their kids. Women don't fight so hard for themselves, but they will climb mountains for their kids. And I would argue this should be the next civil rights movement. Enraged parents, mothers especially, who are going to go out there and tell the porn industry, you're not having access to my kid. Sorry, he or she is too precious. Thank you.
Wow, Gail, I mean, this has been a whole hour and everybody has been totally mesmerized by the data, but how you say, and also the solution you bring, because all your courses are all free and accessible to every parent, every school. But
all over the world.
All over the world. So your kindness to create this possibility for parents and schools and educators and governments is sublime, because very few people take the stand. Because I know you get a lot of threats and controversial things happen. But tell us a little bit about the challenges you've had in the last maybe 5-6 years. Which were the three most challenging moments where you are trying to really bring the truth, because that's what you're bringing, and then what happened? How did you solve it? Who helped you?
Okay, so I think the first single challenge was when we got the startup money for this. My first thought was, okay, this is great. We've got this money. I'll go and look at all the parents program that exists for parents to help build resilience and resistance in their kids to porn, and we'll make it better because I'm going to bring in top draw people. So then, when I said, can everyone turn their cameras on? I love to see
Yeah.
people. We're all so isolated. It's so great to see people. Thank you. So, so the biggest challenge, much to my horror, when I started doing the research, was there was not one single program. I thought, oh, what have I signed up for? But I mean, really, it kept me awake. I can't tell you how many nights, because I thought we would just improve upon what was out there. So what it felt like was we had to jigsaw, but no picture at the end. You know, like normally you get your picture at the end and you know what pieces you're putting together. We had no pieces. I didn't know where to start. So this is why I went out. And, you know, after doing this for many years, I knew many, many people in top fields of pediatrics. And so I would say that was the first challenge. But then by bringing together all of these experts and us really spending time on what we were going to do, that helped me. I think the second challenge was finding experts to write this, because this is a field where, to be honest, there's not a lot of academics working on this. And I hate to tell you, but the academics who study pornography are pro-pornography, some of them. They come out of the humanities, not the social sciences, and they argue that pornography is empowering for women. They don't have any empirical research to back that up, of course, but as a sociologist and a social scientist, whatever I say has to be research-based. So we traveled the world to find, so our experts are drawn from all over the world. I mean, we don't just use the United, I live in the United States, I've been here for 30 years, irrespective of my accent, which is still as strong as it always was, but I live here for 30 years. So we built, what we did was we found the experts. That was a challenge, to find people who had the knowledge who could do this. And then I think the third biggest challenge, which I've had, I think forever, is that I feel so passionate about this. Because once you see what I have seen, and once you have heard what I have heard, you cannot unsee it and you cannot unhear it. It is there. And I think pornography is the biggest thing, is a digital health crisis of the digital age. Once you know what's going on, and then the thing when I hear the young people speak, the stories that I carry with me, forget the porn images that swim through my head, just the stories of the pain. And you know what? It's all so unnecessary. It needn't be. It just needn't be. This is brought onto us by the porn industry. And that's why I feel compelled to do something along with, obviously with the Culture Reframed team. And building the Culture Reframed team was a challenge because, again, luckily I got the best luck in the world. I have the most wonderful executive director. We have a fabulous team. And that's critical when you're building a nonprofit, especially because we are a small shop with a huge international reputation. So we're always overwhelmed with requests to speak, with requests to write. I just had to finish testimony like 5 minutes before I went on for for Minnesota State House on this issue. We're overwhelmed. That's the challenge. We are overwhelmed with work, and we are a small shop. And a lot of people don't get, if I was an anti-trafficking nonprofit, immediately people would get it. The problem with us is that people don't, we have to make the case before funders or foundations understand it, and a lot of them don't get it. So we can't get a foot in the door. But when we do get the foot in the door, they get it. But these are challenges because we are, I would say we are ahead of the game. We are 5 years ahead of our time. In 5 years, people are going to be running to us. But 5 years means another generation of kids are going to be exposed to pornography. So we want to grow and develop and scale up right now to deal with this crisis.
Yeah, especially because you say that it's only since 2000, meaning a few years ago, that porn has become free. And so that's how it's become
2007, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, when we spoke the first time, I was very intrigued by the fact that the UK and Canada were considering the digital age as a how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning that we're going to put in the cell phone devices where you had to opt in or opt out with it, where you could have porn or not in your cell phone, so that basically a parent could just opt out, and then a kid cannot have it in his phone. What happened to that initiative?
Well,
I thought it was a very easy solution.
No, it was an even better one proposed. So what happened was I was asked by the British Parliament to give a presentation along with a man called John Carr, who is head of the EU Digital Safety, wonderful guy. So we went to Parliament and we proposed something even better, which was called age verification. And this was years in the making. This was after the opt-in, opt-out failed. And what we proposed and legislation was eventually written was that you had to be age verified at 18 by a third party. You got a chip. You were not allowed onto a porn site till you uploaded the chip to show you were 18 or above. Any porn site that was in violation of that would be fined on the first violation. Second violation would be fined even more, and third violation would be dropped from the internet. So we are talking about serious consequences. It was all ready to go, right? We had a huge conference beforehand, 1 month before. The British government said it's going in June 2020, and guess what? They didn't do it. And we think it's because the porn industry came in and killed it. But England was going to be the first place. Now, it has happened in France. Poland's working on it. Mexico's working on it. And just in August, we had another virtual conference, 20 countries. And there's about, and I don't want to say which countries exactly because we want to keep it quiet because we don't want the porn industry to know where we're going, there are other countries working on this. In this country, no traction whatsoever in the US. We will have an age verification in other countries where literally no one under the age of 18 will be, or very few. I mean, a few will get around it, but it will be very, very difficult to get around the age verification legislation. But the US, there's just no traction at all. So that's why Culture Reframed at this moment is not doing that. We're doing where we're getting traction, which is with the medical profession and parents.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a sobering knowledge. I mean, there's something, only in 2016, the Oxford Dictionary created this term called post-truth, that people know what is the truth, but they don't care, and they keep doing whatever they did for the last, because of unconscious bias. And so all this you're saying is people are totally ignoring this truth and acting otherwise. I
Well,
would
sorry, can I just add one thing to that, Laura? I have
like
to say, after 30 years of doing this, so I have a lot of experience to look back on, things are shifting. Things are shifting profoundly. First of all, the number of requests that we get from child safety, from pediatricians, from parents, tells you that people are beginning to wake up to this. There's no question. The other thing that's amazing is the media. I mean, I used to have the most hostile, you know, I do a lot of media, and it would always be hostile. It's not anymore, right? There's been a big shift into, I mean, I would get a phone call, standard phone call, we're so Gail Dines, you're a right-winger, you're a right-wing book-burning conservative. And I would say, well, actually, I'm a progressive Jewish feminist, so you got me in the wrong category altogether. You know what they'd do? They'd slam the phone down on me. They wouldn't even, because they wanted to pigeonhole me. That's not happening anymore. Even magazines like Vice.com, which is pretty pro-porn, we even get in there. So I was just on NPR. I was even on Fox, which is interesting, just 2 weeks ago. I mean, you know, I don't know if anyone saw Nick Kristoff's big article in the New York Times. I worked with Nick on that. It was my data that was published in there. He didn't quote me, but that's okay. I can live with that. But it was all my data, the work that we'd done around MindGeek, because my husband, who is a professor at the business school, and I we were the first people writing about MindGeek and following the money of what they're doing and their business plan. So things are shifting. I think things are ripe now for us to jump.
fantastic. So is there any question that anybody who would like to ask a question, please open your mics, or we can, you know, I have a few
see some questions here. A lot of people saying thank you. You're more than welcome. Thank you for coming to this. What makes women want to enter the world and get so physically damaged? Okay, they don't. What happens is, we know from studies that the majority of women in porn were sexually abused as children, are being pimped in. We also know what's happening is because they are indeed porn ready. You know, often working class girls who are looking at minimum wage jobs, if they're lucky, are seeing these HBO specials on how great it is to be a porn star and thinking, I can do this, I can make tons of money. What they don't know is they're going to last 3 months, their bodies are going to be destroyed and they're going to be thrown out because they don't tell them the true story of what happens. So women do not choose this. I do not know any woman with a PhD or an MD or a law degree says, you know what, I think I'll give that up and go into porn. It doesn't work like that. So it's very easy to get into porn. It's almost impossible to get out. So it's not a choice, really. Stopping porn completely is a big ask. Would step one to show kids it's not real and be damaging? Yes. Let's get real here. The porn industry is not going away soon. So given that, we have to understand that we have to do a public health approach. And this is why we are building the sex education program as well as everything else, is that we want to get kids, we want to get to the kids before the porn industry does. That's what we want. We say we want to talk to the kids before the porn industry does.
And that question is right there that says, at what age do you start with kids at today?
Well, you don't start talking about porn around 4 or 5, but you start what's called scaffolding. So I'll give you an example of what we did with my son. We talked about his body and how beautiful it was, but how private it was, and he owned it and it was his. And then as they get a bit older, you talk about more about how they're going to be, how to think about their other people's bodies and respect for other people's. You scaffold. So when he got to 11, and remember, I didn't have to grow up with the cell phones, but you know, porn was already on the internet. And when he was 11, my son's vocabulary was already things like, you know, the word sexism was dropping out of his mouth at the age of 4 and stuff. And I always say my son's first language was feminism, so he saw stuff before I did. So at 11, I said to him, you know, we're talking and we were actually baking. And I said to him, you know what, honey, you know, you're at an age where either you might look for pornography or a friend might show you, and I can't be with you all the time. And you know what? I shouldn't be with you all the time. You don't want me breathing down your neck. But I want you to think about something before you choose to look, because you do have a choice to look. I want you to realize that you don't have to look. So I want you to think about something. I said, you're going to grow up into a wonderful adult when we don't know what your sexuality is yet. Maybe you're gay, maybe you're straight, who knows what you're going to be, but you know what? You are going to own it, and he's going to belong to you, and he's going to be part of the wonderful person you're going to be. But I said, if you look at porn, you understand they're going to steal something from you that you haven't yet owned. And that is a terrible thing to give away, because it should be yours and you should decide what it is. And to tell you how it worked in his 20s when he was at university, we talked about porn. He said, well, Mum, you pretty much ruined that one for me, which of course was completely my goal. And then to show you the bigger impact, he was going with his friends he thought, for a drink. And then he found out they were going to a strip club. And he turned back and went back to his dorm. And I said to him, what made you do that? And he said to me, you know, and I thought I was going to get the mother violence against women anti-porn thing. And what I'd got was something very different. He said to me, you know, Mom, I only have this one body to live in. And I don't think I could have stood to live in this body if I would have gone to a strip club and watched a woman be exploited. So I just couldn't do it. And I thought, that's it. You want them to have their own moral compass. He doesn't want his mother going, you know, walking in his head. He wants the moral compass from within. And that's what we do at Culture Reframed. We don't want to be wagging our fingers at kids. We want them to help them develop a sense of who they are with their own moral compass, and around pornography, but other issues as well. If anything's been lost in this culture over the last few years, it's a sense of inner morality, you know, and I don't mean the right-wing grabbing of morality. I mean of what it means to be human at the deepest and deepest of levels. So I would say start scaffolding, and hopefully when we scale up, we will start helping parents of younger children. We started with tweens because we knew we wouldn't get traction with younger children, but we need to probably circle back and get to younger ages.
So here I have another question here that's
Yeah.
very good. It is about music. Explicit music is so pornographic and so damaging sometimes. So you're talking about visuals most of the time, but you never mention music. Where does that fit in the way you are dealing with solving the problem?
Well, it's part of the hypersexualized pop culture that we talk about in our programs, because that's why we talk about hypersexualized culture and porn culture, because the music is that. Now, one of the things about the music is that most of the music comes with videos. So it is visual, because what happens is when you hear the music, you start playing the video in your mind, which is like basically soft to close to hardcore pornography. So if you see some of those videos, they used to be porn. 15 years ago, you'd think you were watching porn, okay? So it's both a visual and an audio impact and hit to the body. And these young people, before they even get to porn, I see a lot of these videos as grooming tools to porn for kids, right? They're being groomed by a lot of videos, not just hip hop, but all sorts of music, and especially the hypersexualization of the videos are just awful. So this is what it means to be swilling in a world of hypersexualized pop culture and pornography. And think about also the video games. In Grand Theft Auto, you get extra points from murdering prostituted women, right? If you can murder them with a baseball bat, or you can run them over in a car. This is after you've had sex with them and you see them having sex. This is the biggest selling video game to kids all over the world, Grand Theft Auto. So these kids are awash in all of this. But I have to say something, as terrible as it sounds, it is a house of cards, because when you go in, and I often go into high schools or colleges for only 2 hours. We're not talking now about a 14-week course. I go in for 2 hours. You take one card out of this hypersexualized porn culture, the whole thing collapses. After 2 hours, the change in that room, those students are ready to storm the porn industry. They are so enraged by how they've been manipulated. When you explain their level of manipulation that has gone on to get them to porn, because no adolescent likes to think they've been manipulated. They hate that, but they are being manipulated. So the good part of this is it doesn't take much to pull down this house of cards. It really doesn't. And so as much as we're dealing with an enormous problem, reshifting the template from a pornographic one to a non-pornographic one is absolutely doable. And in fact, we owe our kids that. That's what we owe.
Wow. Yeah, grant officer thing, just in case people didn't get that name. Yeah, this is such a, we've heard that since the very beginning when it was created. But Gail, I know we could continue our conversation for a very long time, but I think we need to wrap up.
Okay.
And I would love if you could give us just a few closing remarks, and so that we can um, act and do something and help and create real action.
First, may I ask, because I know this is difficult, may I ask how people are feeling? Because this is a lot. I mean, I'm going to disappear, and I know I've just kind of on you. So would it okay to take 2 minutes, Laura, just for people to check in and see how they're feeling? Because so that you're not just left sitting there stewing in all the emotions that this has probably brought up. Would that be okay, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. You
So
know,
people unmic and unmute rather, and
you can unmute and I will
having the Parents of Tweens program is exactly what you should be doing to then speak to them. We've got the discussion points, we've got the conversations, there's videos up there that you need to see it first, but you can watch with them. Because the truth is you can't monitor, and neither, as I say, should we be monitoring them 24. So you need to help them to start building that sense of moral compass, so that when the most important thing we say is that the first thing to do is, if you've got kids around the age of 9 or 10, and you have not had conversations about this, the first thing to do is apologize and say to them, I'm sorry, I haven't talked to you about this, I should have done. And then you do that after you've done the Culture Reframed program, so you've got the knowledge of what to do. But there's many conversations up there, and we sort of did it in a way that was to do a mindfulness. We say don't lecture, don't do, and you know, in some cases we talk about, you know, if you find porn on your kid's phone or something, and you go in, close the door, walk out, go to the Culture Reframe program, read the Compose Yourself model, because you need to calm down. And then at some point you go back, you knock on the door, you give the kid the privacy, and you say, at some point in the next 2 days, we're going to have to figure a time to talk about this. You decide when you're ready, but it has to be the next 2 days. And that way you give your kid a breathing space. And remember, the porn industry has been leeching power from the kid. So you need to give some power back to that kid. And that's where they get within the time period that they decide. So we've also brought mindfulness into this for the parent and you to help with the kid. But that kid will be mortified when they find out that you've looked at porn. You know, you have to be very careful how you go with the kid, because they already feel so much shame. Now, if your kids haven't looked at it, this is a perfect time to start discussing it. And everything in the tween program is age appropriate for 9 to 12. You know your kid best. So we say, you know what you should be saying, what stuff to include in the conversations, what stuff not, but begin now. And hopefully they haven't been exposed, so you are ahead of the game if they haven't been exposed, but don't put it off another day, right?
Okay, thank you so much.
So with that, if there's any other comments, that would be great. Otherwise, Sylvia, you want to?
Yeah.
It would collapse tomorrow. And our kids are seen as commodities to monetize and buy and sell for the porn industry. I know, it's enraging, but you know, I always say, use the rage, make sure it doesn't overtake you, let it be like a slow simmer, and you use that to catapult you into activism. That's the way it works. I know every time, I give this talk, I can't tell you how many times, and each time I feel that slow burn of rage. It doesn't matter how many times I speak about this, and feel even more committed to really fighting back, because, you know, we're not going down without a fight. We're not going down without a fight. That's my view.
And I would say we're not going down.
Right. I agree.
We're not going down.
That's even better. I correct myself. We're not going down. We're going to fight, and we are going to triumph. You know what?
Because and basically I'm, as Laura knows, you know, I've been kind of a big supporter of the mission and everything that Women for Solutions stands for. And I believe in my work as well, I believe in the caring economy, as we say it. This is the reason why this resonates so much, because we talk about feminine kind of aspects of our caring economy, not necessarily men and women, but to find those feminine qualities of empathy, of care, of that are lost in our economy, and that is motivated solely by money. And look where it's taking. I mean, and the porn, it's kind of feeding into that. It's sort of, instead of teaching those empathy, those qualities of empathy and care and caring for the other. And I can see it, in the teen generation, it's all about aggression, and it's all about, and obviously it's coming from somewhere. Now we know where it's coming from. Some of the stuff that they get exposed to, it's terrible, really. It's terrible.
So then let's make a promise. Join us, help us. We're having these tours. We do come and everyone to join us in this battle. We need, women and men who feel strongly about this. We really do, to do this. And it's increasing. And, this is the right time, in the sense that, as I say, it's ripe. It's absolutely ripe now. And kids being at home more is really the problem, because, many more parents are fearful of what their kids are coming across. So, I mean, one of the reasons I give this is to spread this message, to bring people so that we can organize to do this, because this is a battle worth fighting and worth winning. It is really a battle worth fighting and worth winning.
And if you say it's a card of cards, it's a cloud of cards, a house of cards, it is very feasible to win, especially because there's no parent who says, I want my kid to be exposed to porn. Doesn't it? It's impossible.
No.
So on that note, we need a few words to close the talk today. Would be wonderful, Gail, and so that we can this recording will be going to many people again and again.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for inviting me, Laura. Thank you for all your support over the years as well. It's meant a lot to us. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, a pleasure. After all these years, I think I'm very passionate about stopping.
I remember from day one.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't need much convincing, Laura. You got it instantly. Exactly.
So, it's a gateway to trafficking, and how terrible is that? Because you see it, and porn is a little bit of is the hiding, is exactly under the.
In plain sight, hiding exactly. In plain sight.
I think that a very good photo would be an iceberg where trafficking is on the top and the porn is all that is underneath, and that's why it's so difficult to stop it.
Totally, but when something gets you, it gets you. What can I say? This got me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and we really can't thank you so more, because this is such important element. If we want sustainable companies, we want sustainable economies, we want a normality in our children's life. This is a key element. So thank you very, very much, because I think this is a really a pandemic of the digital age.
A pandemic within a pandemic, we call it.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone.